Human behavior is shaped by a wide range of psychological factors, many of which stem from how individuals perceive themselves in relation to others. Two significant, yet often misunderstood psychological patterns are the inferiority complex and the superiority complex. These terms, originally introduced by the psychologist Alfred Adler, describe contrasting but interconnected ways people may cope with feelings of self-worth. An inferiority complex arises when a person feels inadequate or less valuable, often leading to low self-esteem and self-doubt. In contrast, a superiority complex may develop as a defensive mechanism, where a person projects confidence or arrogance to mask their own insecurities. Both complexes can impact personal development, relationships, and mental health, making them important subjects for psychological exploration and self-awareness.
We all walk around with stories we tell ourselves, stories about who we are, stories about our worth. Sometimes these stories get a little tangled. They can make us feel smaller than we are, or they can puff us up in ways that aren't quite real. This is where we meet the ideas of inferiority and superiority complexes. They sound big and scary, like clinical terms, but really they are about the very human experience of how we see ourselves in relation to others. An inferiority complex whispers that we are not good enough. It is a persistent, nagging feeling. It tells us we lack something essential. Maybe we think we are not smart enough, or not talented enough, or not lovable enough. This feeling can be deeply rooted. It can color every experience, making challenges seem insurmountable and successes feel like flukes. On the other flip side, there is the superiority complex. This is when someone projects an exaggerated sense of their own importance. They might act as if they are better than everyone else. They might boast, they might criticize. But here's the secret. Often this outward display of superiority is a mask. It is a defense mechanism. Understanding this connection is the first brave step. It is about daring to look at the stories we tell ourselves. An inferiority complex is more than just feeling down sometimes. It is a deep, persistent sense of being less adequate than others. Imagine carrying an invisible weight. This weight constantly reminds you of your perceived shortcomings. It makes simple tasks feel like mountains. It makes criticism feel like a confirmation of your deepest fears. People struggling with this often feel like they don't measure up. They compare themselves endlessly to others. And in these comparisons, they almost always find themselves lacking. This isn't about humility. It's about a painful, distorted self-perception that can be incredibly limiting and isolating. There are several key features that often show up with an inferiority complex. One is extreme sensitivity to criticism. Even constructive feedback can feel like a personal attack. There's also a tendency towards shyness or social withdrawal. It feels safer to stay hidden than to risk judgment. Another feature is overcompensation. This might look like someone trying too hard to please others, or perhaps they become overly competitive, desperately seeking validation through achievements. Constant self-deprecation, even when joking, can also be a sign. This negative self-talk becomes a relentless soundtrack. It erodes confidence. It stifles creativity. Now, let's talk about the superiority complex. This is when a person acts as if they are far better than those around them. They might seem arrogant. They might boast about their achievements, real or imagined. They often have a strong need to be right. They might interrupt others, dismiss their opinions, or belittle their accomplishments. It can look like extreme confidence, but it's important to dig a little deeper. This outward show of being more than is often a carefully constructed defense. It's a way to protect a fragile ego from perceived threats. The key features of a superiority complex can be quite noticeable. There's often an exaggerated sense of self-importance. This person might believe their talents and achievements are far greater than they actually are. They may display condescending behavior, looking down on others. They might be quick to criticize or find fault in people or situations. There can also be a lack of empathy, making it difficult for them to understand or share the feelings of others. Underneath this confident exterior, there's often a hidden insecurity. The louder the boasting, the deeper the underlying fear of not being good enough might actually be. This isn't true self-esteem. It's a performance designed to convince both the self and others of a worth that feels inherently lacking. Causes. So, where do these heavy feelings of inferiority and superiority begin? Often the roots can be traced back to our earliest experiences, particularly in childhood. Imagine a young child like a small plant. They need nurturing, encouragement, and a sense of safety to grow strong. If a child constantly hears criticism, if they are frequently compared unfavorably to siblings or peers, or if their achievements are dismissed, seeds of doubt can be planted. These experiences can teach a child that they are not good enough as they are. This can create a fertile ground for an inferiority complex to develop later in life. Our social environment plays a huge role too, well beyond childhood. Think about the pressures of school, work, and even social media. We live in a world that often emphasizes competition and comparison. Seeing curated, perfect-looking lives online can make anyone feel inadequate. Experiencing bullying, discrimination, or social rejection can also deeply wound our sense of self-worth. Personality traits also come into play. Some of us might be naturally more sensitive or introverted. We might be more prone to self-reflection, which can sometimes turn into self-criticism if we are not careful. The inner turmoil, psychological impacts of these complexes. Living with an inferiority or superiority complex takes a significant toll on our psychological well-being. It's like an internal storm that rarely calms. For those grappling with feelings of inferiority, anxiety is a constant companion. There's the anxiety of being judged, the anxiety of failing, the anxiety of not measuring up. This can lead to chronic stress, which we know affects both our minds and our bodies. Depression can also set in, as the persistent belief in one's own inadequacy can drain life of its joy and color, making it hard to find motivation or hope. The impact on self-esteem is profound. An inferiority complex, by its very nature, means having low self-worth. It's a fundamental disbelief in one's own value and capabilities. This can lead to a distorted self-image, where individuals focus excessively on their perceived flaws and weaknesses, while discounting their strengths and positive qualities. They might struggle with decision-making, constantly second-guessing themselves. They might also find it difficult to accept compliments or acknowledge their own successes, attributing them to luck rather than their own efforts or abilities. This creates a cycle of negative self-perception. For those exhibiting a superiority complex, the psychological impacts might be less obvious on the surface, but they are just as real. Or don't, effects on personality and social life. These complexes don't just live inside our heads. They profoundly shape our personalities and how we show up in our relationships. An inferiority complex can make someone appear very shy or withdrawn. They might avoid social situations altogether because the fear of judgment is too overwhelming. Or, paradoxically, they might try too hard to please everyone, becoming a people pleaser, always seeking external validation to quiet the inner critic. This can lead to a personality that seems to lack a strong core, always adapting to what they think others want them to be. In social interactions, someone with an inferiority complex might struggle to express their own opinions or needs. They might be overly agreeable, fearing that any disagreement could lead to rejection. This can make it difficult to form authentic connections, as true relationships are built on mutual respect and the ability to be oneself. They might also be prone to jealousy or envy, as others' successes can feel like a painful reminder of their own perceived shortcomings. This can strain friendships and make it hard to genuinely celebrate the happiness of others, further isolating them. On the other hand, a superiority complex often leads to a personality that others find difficult or off-putting. This individual might come across as arrogant, boastful, and condescending. They might dominate conversations, rarely listening to others, and quick to dismiss differing viewpoints. While they might attract a certain type of attention, it's often not the kind that leads to deep, meaningful relationships. Pathways to healing and growth. The good news is that we are not stuck with these complexes forever. There are pathways to healing and growth. The very first step, and perhaps the bravest, is self-awareness. It's about recognizing these patterns within ourselves. It's about noticing the critical inner voice or the urge to puff ourselves up. This isn't about self-blame, it's about gentle, honest observation. Naming these feelings and behaviors is powerful. It takes them out of the shadows and allows us to see them for what they are. Learned patterns, not fixed truths about who we are. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can be incredibly helpful. This approach helps us identify and challenge the negative thought patterns that fuel both inferiority and superiority. If your thought is "I'm a failure," CBT helps you examine the evidence for and against that thought. It teaches you to reframe those thoughts into more realistic and compassionate ones. Mindfulness practices also offer powerful tools. By learning to stay present with our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can create space between ourselves and these overwhelming emotions, reducing their power over us. Building supportive relationships is crucial. We need people in our lives who see us, accept us, and encourage us authentically. These safe connections can help heal the wounds that may have contributed to these complexes. Sharing our vulnerabilities with trusted friends or family can be incredibly liberating.
And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more mind-blowing psychology videos.